lot of conflicting feelings on this one, and I'm going to try my best to state my thoughts as plainly as possible. Hi there everyone, welcome back to On the Flip Side. My name is Adam Shawwalker, your host, and today we're going to be checking out this long-awaited album from Deron Miller's 96 Bitter Beings, Synergy Restored. This is the follow-up to 2018's Campaign, an album that was crowdsourced initially under the name Mecha CKY, but for whatever reasons, I'm assuming legal, was changed to 96 Bitter Beings, of course referencing the song 96 Quite Bitter Beings off of the first CKY album, Volume 1. According to Deron Miller himself, when I interviewed him last month, Synergy Restored and Campaign were both written at the same time. And that's kind of raised some questions for me personally, like what was the deciding factor for which songs went on which album? He also said at one point that the writing process yielded like 50 tracks and that they were narrowed down from there. I have always been a big fan of a strong album opener and closer, and hopefully through the middle it's all killer no filler, which was the mentality here, the idea being that in any listening order that any song would be equally as strong or as hard-hitting as an album opener, which I think is a good concept on paper, but in practice it does raise some issues. While I think for the most part Deron has managed to mostly fulfill that ambition, at least instrumentally, there are a lot of songs here quality-wise that I think are on par with each other as strong, heavy-hitting songs. Like, of course, the opening track here, Vaudeville's Revenge, or Wish Me Dead, Throw Yourself Inside, 90 Car Pileup, Taken by Surprise, Adios Amigo, or Conditioned or Unconditional, which is a very healthy chunk of this album that I do quite like, but there's also a lot of stuff that I think lands kind of just below that bar and not always gracefully. Every album, even with the best laid plans, are going to have some ups and downs, and personally for me, the instrumentals here are all very high highs. Every track sounds fantastic on that end. My issue is with Deron's vocals, which are iconic, and I do love them, but I have noticed that on this project especially, there are some points where things seem a little strained, like he's super close to hitting some of these notes, but just isn't in the right register, or if he's intentionally singing off key, I don't get why. Fire Skyline specifically comes to mind. Like, I like the track's concept of a game of truth or dare leading to a bunch of kids setting Los Angeles on fire and watching the skyline burn, and it's not like the problems I have here go through the whole song. It's just like very specific segments of tracks in this song. It's like the chorus lines, the beauty of the fire skyline, which both sounds on key and off key at the same time. I just don't really get this melody that they're trying to work with here. And Bedtime Story I think also gives me a very similar vibe, but more so on the lyrical side of things, with this chorus which I thought would grow on me more, but I just can't really get into, though I am really enjoying a lot of the pitch shifted guitars here. Past those initial concerns, and there will be more, let's just get into this track by track. Vaudeville's Revenge to me is absolutely the most logical choice for an opener here, by far the most familiar sonically to the later CKY material, like Carver City specifically. I do find some of the lyrics to be a little bit rough at points, like the line swallowing a sword until it splits your spine, which is cool, but it doesn't really feel like it fits with the previous lines in any kind of like rhyming scheme. And that actually pops up on this album a lot, actually, just like weird moments where the lyrics feel a little disjointed, and in most cases the points where that happens are kind of recovered by the fact that the lyrics themselves that are kind of rough are still pretty cool. Past that though, Vaudeville's Revenge is pretty much the by the numbers classic revitalization of the point where CKY left off with a fresh coat of paint. Wish Me Dead I have very similar opinions on. This one to me sounds like a bit more of a pull from the An Answer Can Be Found era, though again the vocal delivery here for pretty much every point in this track, while it is that classic CKY style, it doesn't sound like it's in the right key at all. Like, it is way too high pitched, which is odd because they've clearly recorded several tracks for the vocals, like a low and a high register, and when the lows are more prevalent they sound way more on key. So I'm not really sure what the deal is, if maybe this is just a mixing issue. So as it sits though, I'm not really feeling the vocals, but I love the instrumentals on this track. Like, Deron Miller has absolutely not lost any kind of touch there from start to finish. This is a killer song instrumentally. Fire Skyline, again, I enjoy certain parts of. The concept of the track is solid. I like the whole arson thing. Very much the same issue with the last song being present here though, not through the whole song. Like, there are moments where the vocals land just fine. And also, like the last song, the instrumentals are great. They are giving me a very similar vibe to Disengage the Simulator off of Volume 1. Throw Yourself Inside I think feels like the most like an evolution of that older material and presents itself like the logical next step in Deron's sound. Obviously the roots are there and everything in this project is going to kind of sound like everything that Deron has done in a way because it's just very distinctive. But like I was saying, this song specifically feels like the furthest things have been pushed in a newer sound for Deron. I do like the whole theme of just throwing yourself as hard as you can at something being the central theme of this track. It's relatable, maybe a little bit ham-fisted, but it still works. tracks. 90 Car Pileup I think is probably one of the best tracks here for the vocals and the instrumentals. I think the lower register that Deron has landed on here is way more appropriate for this song, and kind of makes me wonder where this delivery has been for the rest of these tracks, because it sounds far, far better than the highs, which I don't think sound right. Again, I dig the theme and the story for this track of road raging and wanting to take your rage out on the world by causing just a massive, massive car wreck. Bedtime Story I think hits a weird lyrical style, but I do appreciate the vocals varying in register, which ends up working pretty nicely for the most part. Instrumentally, it's maybe a little bit too campy for my taste. It's kind of like they're translating 80s pop into these single-note death metal-inspired guitars, which is just kind of a wacky blend that sort of works as a spectacle, but I don't know if I'm super into it. Blood Rock Mania, again, I think works better on the vocal end of things, and there is some solid guitar work and groovy rhythms, but I don't think the chorus really does it for me. And I'm not sure if Blood Rock, in the context of this song, is supposed to be referring to what Deron is presenting here, or if there's more to this concept that doesn't really contextualize itself in this song. Slither Away, to me, seems like the most blatant prodding of the subject of Deron's departure from CKY and his music versus the continued use of the CKY moniker by his former bandmates, which here I kinda can't really feel comfortable endorsing. Personally, I've always just thought musical beefs were really stupid. Like, just deal with the opportunities you have and build something. I have the same opinion on pretty much any musical beef from the present day to stuff that's been going on for decades. No one should want to hear about MGK versus Corey Taylor. No one should want to hear about Metallica versus Megadeth. I just want this trend to die because it doesn't really get anyone anywhere, especially when you further cement it with the rock equivalent of a fucking diss track. This isn't Nas and Jay-Z. No one's getting ethered. Everyone here is a fucking adult. Please stop. Anyway, for that stance alone, I'm not really super huge into Slither Away. Taken by Surprise is one of the points on the album where I can actually appreciate the higher register. Feels a lot more natural here in comparison to some of the earlier tracks. There are still moments, though, where things seem off-key, but they are not nearly as blatant. I'm also a pretty big fan of the switch up towards the end of the song. Things get a little bit more moody, maybe a little bit more brooding. It's pretty solid. Adios Amigo, I think, is one of the more unfortunate inclusions on the rough vocal work, because I enjoy pretty much every part of this song except for the vocals. And I really wish that wasn't just such a common issue on this album. Conditioned or Unconditional as an album closer is luckily very solid all the way through. I'm getting a very similar vibe to As the Tables Turn for this track. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I am always a believer in a strong opener and closer, and luckily, even with the logic applied of every track needing to be as strong as any album opener, there was clearly just as much thought put into the finishing track. And I've had a review copy of this album since mid-September, and in that time, I've been playing this album to death, and over the course of that time, I have been really trying to soak in this release. CKY has been a very, very important part of my musical development. Those original albums are some of my favorite records of all time. And with Deron Miller coming out of the woodwork with more material that is meant to be the spiritual successor to that sound and style, I've been absolutely thrilled. The nostalgia has really been coming in waves for this album, and I've been listening to this thing for a while now, and now that it's kind of starting to wear off and the rose-colored tint has started to dull, I am realizing just how much I want to like this thing, even with its faults. Of which the issues mostly are with the vocals. And it's been kind of weird wrapping my head around how I want to word this, because Deron came on my channel for an interview last month, and I have a lot of respect for the guy and a genuine love of his music, and I love the instrumentals for this album. I think they're as good, if not wholly better, than any of the work Deron has done in recent memory. But I just cannot ignore this vocal work, which to me is just not right on at least half of the tracks here. And I've listened to this album with several other people just to get other folks' thoughts on the vocals specifically, and it's not just an issue for me. Every person who has heard this thing has said more or less the same thing. I want to like this album more. I'm still getting plenty of enjoyment out of it, but it's very much rooted in the fact that I have loved Deron's previous output immensely. This really hurts to say, but I'm thinking Synergy Restored is a pretty firm 6. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this album in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe. And if you like what I'm doing here, drop a tip on the PayPal. Remember to check out my Instagram, my Reverb, and my Depop. Links to all of those are in the description below. Thank you all so much again, and we'll see you on the flip side.